welcome everybody to the Patriot Pravda podcast, the show where we continue to watch the degradation of the United States as it severely spirals downward, continuing to be the dumpster fire that it currently is. Again, I cannot repeat it more. Please, Patriots, wake up. Wake up. Today, we will be covering more of the global warming lies, who we think blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, the violence that continues to follow Governor candidate Lee Zeldin, and will Hunter Biden finally be indicted? And also, last and certainly not least of all, Pennsylvania, my home state. I'm coming after you today.
Welcome to Patriot Pravda.
Oh, yeah.
My head's been wet with the midnight dew. I've been down on bended knee, talking to the man from Galilee. He spoke to me in a voice so sweet, I thought I heard the shuffle of angels' feet. He called my name when my heart stood still, when he said, "Man, go do my will."
Well, what a day, and we're back and recording today.
Yep, it's good to be back. I know sometimes our schedule can seem a little inconcise and random and all around the place, but just with the way things are in our personal lives, sometimes we don't get a chance to record every single week, but that's okay. We try to stay on top of things as much as we can, but also hitting pertinent subject matter that we think would interest y'all.
Yeah, weird schedules happen like this when you're a productive member of society elsewhere.
Indeed. Not to bash on any of those people that do podcasts full time, such as the good Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and all those other good ones out there, especially all the podcasts from Daily Wire and their news organization. And
Yeah.
So, but you know,
when I make that kind of money, I'll dedicate that kind of time.
Exactly. But I think the first thing we're going to talk about today is a little touch on the environmental stuff, global warming, and the climate change.
Yeah. Is it true? Is it not true? What are the lies?
And what I've done is I've pulled from earth.org, which is definitely one of those pro-environmental websites.
Yes.
13 biggest environmental problems of 2022. And we're just going to kind of go over them. We won't maybe not hit them all, or maybe we'll hit them all and just be really brief about it.
Yeah.
But there's 13 big points. And I just wanted to kind of touch on these. And let's just get right into it. You good with that?
Yeah, sounds great. I'm excited to see what kind of stuff they came up with.
Number 1, global warming from fossil fuels. At time of this publication, CO2 parts per million is at 418, and the global temperature rise is 1.1 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels.
That's what
just
they say.
Yeah, that's just the underlying header there. They also go on to say that the last time carbon dioxide levels on our planet were as high as they are today was more than 4 million years ago.
Interesting. 4 million years.
I don't necessarily agree, and the reason being is due to what do you think happens when a volcanic eruption happens? Which happens?
And a lot of stuff gets thrown into the air. A lot of ash.
A lot of other gases, maybe not necessarily carbon dioxide. I'm not entirely familiar with what type of gases come out of a volcanic explosion.
I'm really stuck on how they sent those scientists back in time to make those measurements. Because it sounds like they're stating it as fact, because it would have just come from extrapolating some kind of measurement from now and making guesses on what it might have been 4 million years ago. Because there weren't people 4 million years ago. There wasn't even a 4 million years ago.
Yeah, from a biblical standpoint, no, there was not. But the interesting thing of this is fossil fuels,
right?
Okay? Gasoline, diesel, propane, is not necessarily CO2. There's this carbon dioxide. The main gas that comes from burning fossil fuels is carbon monoxide, CO. I've noticed that they always quote CO2 gases. CO2 is what we breathe out.
Right.
And what plants and other vegetation ingest. Or not necessarily ingest, but use. But I just don't see it from a gasoline diesel burning standpoint, especially with the being CO2 and the main output of combustion from internal combustion engines or external combustion engines is carbon monoxide and water.
Yeah.
Number,
I think a lot of sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh,
But I
that's
think
cool.
a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people are convinced that it's. I mean, in other places, I've had conversations with people where they're convinced, especially in California. Oh my goodness.
and we talked about this last kind of a little bit with the electrical grid in California.
Yeah, people are convinced that vehicles. They're absolutely convinced that vehicles are the problem. That they're putting so many CO2 gases out into the atmosphere that we all need to drive electric.
Failing to realize where the electricity is going to come from for their electric cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They just need to send Benjamin Franklin out there with the kite and the key again.
Great. Poor governance is number 2 on Earth.org's 13 biggest contributors to climate change. According to economists like Nicholas Stern, the climate crisis is a result of multiple market failures. And this kind of goes back to the whole ESG thing that we were talking about, environmental social governance.
Yeah.
And they kind of go on to quote, economists and environmentalists have urged policymakers for years to increase the price of activities that emit greenhouse gases, one of our biggest environmental problems, the lack of which constitutes the largest market failure, for example, through carbon taxes, which will stimulate innovation in low carbon technologies.
Oh, of course it stimulates innovation in those things. If you cut out every other option, people are going to have to invest in growing that field because there's no other option.
But here's the other thing too, is I could go on a rant about taxes in general for a while, but a carbon tax is just such it's such a asinine idea. It's or arbitrary is the better word that I was looking for. It's such an arbitrary idea. What am I going to have to do? Like, when I calculate my income taxes and file my taxes every year, how am I going to calculate my carbon emissions to be properly taxed on that? Is it going to be based off of like the vehicles that I own and the amount of trash that am I going to have to weigh my trash when I put it out on the street? Am I going to have to itemize the plastic items that I dispose of? Any of sort of like recreational fire that I have out in my yard to toast some marshmallows?
Yeah,
I mean, how are we going to define the personal level of a carbon tax? Or are they going to include that in a purchase?
Yeah, and I know what they do in California, and I just moved to Alaska, so I don't know if they do it here, but in California, I think it was every 2 years, or maybe I just failed to do it every year, but I think it was every 2 years, depending on the age of your car, you would have to get your emissions inspected.
No, they do not have that here.
Yeah, so you have to have your car emissions inspected to make sure that your car is not letting out dirty emissions or whatever.
Yeah. In Massachusetts, where I hail from originally, it's every year.
Yeah.
So I think that's just another type of scam, to be honest, right there. I'm not going to read the whole article. Number 3, food waste. Quote, a third of the food intended for human consumption, around 1.3 billion tons, is wasted or lost. This is enough to feed 3 billion people. Food waste and loss account for a third of greenhouse gas emissions annually. If it was a country, food waste would be the third highest emitter of greenhouse gases behind China and the U.S. I mean, I guess if you're looking at it as a wasted production,
yeah.
Or are they talking about it from food rot?
No, I think they're talking about production-wise, farm vehicles, things like that. So I think that might tie into food waste. Or maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I mean, if it's food waste, I mean, for example, let's take Las Vegas, for example. The food waste there from all your casinos and buffets and restaurants some of it does end up in the trash, but a lot of it for the larger casinos, the food gets separated from the trash, the actual waste, and gets sent to pig farms. Mm-hmm. And it is, of course, then recycled through the pigs eating it and whatnot. But the food that goes to the landfill, I can understand, but it's also just going to biodegrade. So, and yeah, we could touch on the whole fact that the food is not, there's hunger in the world and different things like that. But I mean, it probably wasn't going to make it there anyway to that side of the globe.
And I think that's their biggest thing, is that there's people. I think what they're saying is like, there's people starving all over the globe because of global warming, and here we are wasting so much food.
Yeah.
Part of me kind of takes a Sam Kinison approach. If you're living where there's no food, move to where there is food.
Right. Some of those people are desperately poor.
Right.
So desperately poor that they can't afford to move.
Right.
But, I mean, the amount of money that we've, burned up taking food to them, I suppose we could have moved them to where food is more readily accessible.
Well, yeah, I mean, so there's that, but, and we could provide food to these people, because, I mean, how many times a year do we hear about, from a farmer, the government came to me and told me to throw out all this crop, or to get rid of all this crop, or burn all this crop because they want to control the markets on how much food is being produced and things like that.
Right. I think that's an entirely bogus claim. Biodiversity loss is number 4. Quote, the past 50 years have seen a rapid growth of human consumption, population, global trade, and urbanization, resulting in humanity using more of the Earth's resources than it can replenish naturally.
Isn't it like the left and Democrats, the kind of people who are on this watch out for global warming kind of green kick here, the same people that are trying to convince people to move into cities and make the cities bigger and more powerful and populate the cities, leading to more urbanization?
Yes, it would, but I mean, it's also, I think they're trying to get people out of the countryside too. I don't really completely understand that myself. It does go on to say, a recent WWF report found that the population sizes of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and amphibians have experienced a decline of an average of 68% between 1970 and 2016. I feel like that's way larger of a number than 68%.
You said it decreased by 68%?
Yeah, found that the population sizes of mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and amphibians have experienced a decline of an average of 68% between 1970 and 2016.
Didn't the World Wildlife Foundation, maybe I'm messed up here, but aren't they frequently talking about how they're always getting animals out of extinction, increasing the populations of certain groups of animals? Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm wrong.
Animals such as pangolins, sharks, and seahorses are significantly affected by the illegal wildlife trade.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's not from climate change. That's from wildlife trade, poachers.
Yeah, and that is a problem. I will say that. I feel like this list is a catch-all. It's like
it kind of is.
Like, global warming, cars. Global warming, man outside breathing. Global warming, all these different problems are created by global warming.
More broadly, a recent analysis has found that the 6th mass extinction of wildlife on Earth is accelerating. More than 500 species of land animals are on the brink of extinction and are likely to be lost within 20 years. The same number were lost over the whole of the last century. The scientists say that without the human destruction of nature, this rate of loss would have taken thousands of years.
What scientists?
Yeah, I know that they just
the scientists.
The
say.
Scientists say. Yeah, it's such
a
broad statement.
Is this the same Fauci the science?
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've all kind of seen the soft underbelly of the science, quote unquote. Trust the science, trust the science, trust the science. But we all, if you dig down deep into it, into most things in life actually, and it's kind of sad, money is really kind of there at the underlying portion of it. I mean, you know. Moving on, number 5, plastic pollution. In 1950, the world produced more than 2 million tons of plastic per year. By 2015, this annual production swelled to 419 million tons and exacerbating plastic waste in the environment. Now, I do agree with the excess plastic waste. There is proof of that. They actually show a photo here of an enormous amount of plastic waste in this Bay Area. Definitely in a foreign country. It kind of looks like a kind of an Asian country. Could be Korea, could be some Japan, somewhere around there. And yes, I do think that there's a lot of plastic waste.
Yeah, there's
a lot of useless trinkets, a lot of overproduction of certain things, plastic bags,
right.
Just water bottles, things like that.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
but yeah, I do agree that there's a lot of waste there.
There is a lot of waste, but who does it come from? Mostly,
Yeah,
I remember
because the United States has a pretty good respect for, I think, nature in general. Now, there is garbage here that's accumulated in places. That's a given. There's garbage everywhere. But if you look at it on a certain scale, like because I've been to the Middle East, they have no respect for the areas that they live in, let alone nature.
Oh yeah,
There's just garbage everywhere.
garbage and or feces.
And yeah, human waste, human garbage. And so, we've got good trash programs here for the most part, good recycling programs, different things of that nature. So it's not nearly as bad in this country, but in other places of the world, they produce a lot of it and they're not taking care of it as they should.
Right. And I mean, everybody remembers the famous video of the guys who pulled up the sea turtle into the boat and were pulling the straw out of the sea turtle's nose. A lot of people assume that was somewhere around the United States. It was not, first of all. And second of all, from my understanding, research I've done in the past, the United States leads to less than 2% of all the plastic pollution on Earth. Less than 2% is what America is responsible for, which in the grand scheme of things is absolutely minuscule.
Yeah.
So
where is the most of this pollution coming from?
China,
coastal African countries and China?
China, India are the two big ones. And there's several other smaller nations, but China, India are the big ones. And the crazy thing is, because of that photo, when we lived in California, they decided to do the plastic ban. And so everything came in paper, and you had to, if you needed to use plastic bags, you had to pay 10 cents per plastic bag. And that's why I blew some people's minds up here in certain stores. I was like, hey, do I have to pay for the plastic bags? And they're like, wait, what?
Well, in Anchorage, there's the 10-cent bag tax.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But some of the other spots I've been, they're like, why would you have to pay for the bags? I was like, oh, because I came from California, we had to pay for bags. And they're like, that's ridiculous. And I was like, yeah. And like Starbucks changed the shape of their cup and all this other crazy stuff. And I think Tom McDonald put it best in one of his songs where he says, no more plastic straws wrapped in paper, just paper straws wrapped in plastic. Congratulations.
Right. Yeah. And we've all seen, yeah. Number 6, deforestation. Every hour, forests the size of 300 football fields are cut down. By the year 2030, the planet might have only 10% of its forests. If deforestation isn't stopped, they could all be gone in less than 100 years.
No. They will not be gone.
No.
In the next 100 years.
Have you driven across the United States? Or seen?
Yeah. You know how much of the United States forests are unexplored?
Yes. There was a photo, a supposed photo, taken from space of the continental United States. And it showed broadly that most of the United States from this photo was looking like a desert tan color. It's not the case.
Yeah.
Not the case. It was a blatant manipulation of the photo.
Yeah. I mean, look at I would say that would be a more accurate photo before people came to America, because there's whole swaths of land and area that were just desert that now have plant life and are oases. Whole places like the Las Vegas area. There's whole sections of areas around Las Vegas that have plants and plant life and water now. But it was just, before that, it was just arid desert. Same thing with Southern California. A lot of Southern California was just desert. And now, because people live there, the vegetation has grown and there's life supported in that area now, when before it was just literally desert, nothing.
Yeah, and it says the 3 countries experiencing the highest levels of deforestation are Brazil, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Indonesia. However, Indonesia is tackling deforestation, now seeing the lowest rates since the beginning of the century. That could be true, that those individual countries are over harvesting, and they don't have legislation in place or laws that require these whoever's doing the logging to replant as they go along. There is that type of legislation here.
How good of a business model would it be to cut down all the resources that you need and then make no plan to replant?
Right.
So you can, again, harvest.
In a certain number of years, let's just call it 50 years, you forested your permissible area of land for this particular company or whatever.
Right.
And now they've got nothing. Now they go out of business because they can't cut down any trees and sell logs.
Right. It's like a farmer buying a farm, farming it once, and then just saying, well, the land is used up.
Yeah, farming
I can't farm here anymore.
Until all the natural nutrients are depleted, and then not fertilizing it.
Right.
Yeah. Number 7, air pollution. And I feel like this is just another catch-all,
Yeah.
Quote, one of the biggest environmental problems today is our outdoor air pollution. Research from the World Health Organization, oh boy, here we go.
Let me trust the science again.
Yeah, shows that an estimated 4.2 to 7 million people die from air pollutions worldwide every year, and that 9 out of 10 people breathe air that contains high levels of pollutants. In Africa, 258,000 people died as a result of outdoor air pollution in 2017, up from 164,000 in 1990. Causes of air pollution mostly comes from industrial sources and motor vehicles. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
As well as emissions from burning biomass and poor air quality due to dust storms.
So wait, nature is killing people with air pollution?
Nature's been killing people a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. I feel like that estimated 4.2 to 7 million people die from air pollution worldwide every year. And that 9 out of 10 people breathe air that contains high levels of pollutants. Well, what are the pollutants?
Yeah, I do wonder what is considered a pollutant.
Yeah.
Because are they saying a pollutant is something that would not be naturally in air?
Right. Well, dust is naturally in air. For the most part, in some areas, maybe not in others.
Yeah, what is their standard for pollutant? That's what I would want to know.
Are we talking sulfur dioxide? Are we talking, organic mercury vapor? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, anything? Is it everything?
This is
other
just
than,
like I said. This is just another catch-all.
Yeah, is it everything that's in the air other than, other than oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen? Like, is it anything other than those things, or is it a specific grouping?
I might just read this whole thing because on this number 7, because this is just ridiculous. In Europe, a recent report from the EU's environmental agency showed that air pollution contributed to 400,000 annual deaths in the EU in 2012, the last year for which data was available. So they stopped collecting data because it
such a big problem.
In 2012, they stopped collecting data? Or have they just not released the numbers? Maybe it's gone down.
Maybe.
And they don't like the trend.
That's very much a possibility. I'm not.
You'll love this.
Surprised.
In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, attention has been put on the role that air pollution gases has in transporting the virus molecules. Preliminary studies have identified a positive correlation between COVID-19 related mortalities and air pollution, and there is also a plausible association of airborne particles assisting the viral spread. This could have contributed to the high death toll in China, where air quality is notoriously poor, although more definitive studies must be conducted before such a conclusion can be drawn.
Okay, so obviously in an area that has really bad air pollution, you are going to be more likely to be sick. I'm also not surprised that they came to that particular conclusion, though, because according to President Biden, especially with the hurricane down in Florida, while you're thinking of battening down your house in Florida, you have to make sure you go out and get your COVID vaccine. Because this hurricane's going to make COVID worse.
Yeah. I saw that clip too, and it was like President Biden was addressing, it's like, the most important thing you can do to prepare for this hurricane. And it wasn't, get 2x4s and plywood and protect, vulnerable buildings, or get the elderly out of, retirement homes and or, healthcare facilities, or evacuate hospitals, or evacuate yourself.
Oh yeah, or low-lying land areas. Get out.
Yeah, get out, or put things inside that could blow away. It was get your COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah, he was like, that's the number one thing you could do.
Get vaccinated.
Get vaccinated.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because that'll help me from drowning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Number 8, melting ice caps and sea level rise. The climate crisis is warming the Arctic more than twice as fast as anywhere else on the planet. Today, sea levels are rising more than twice as quickly as they did for most of the 20th century as a result of increasing temperatures on Earth. Seas are now rising an average of 3.2 millimeters per year globally, and they will continue to grow up to about 0.7 meters by the end of this century. In the Arctic, the Greenland ice sheet poses the greatest risk for sea levels because melting land ice is the main cause of rising sea levels. And this is something that I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit and there's another article from the Tactical Investor, or tacticalinvestor.com.
Yeah.
Global warming is fake. Let's see if this is true. And they go on to address that there's a little section here that says global warming is fake. A lot of scientists seem to think so. Almost 32,000 scientists signed this petition stating, and there's a hyperlink to that, signed this petition stating that they think the global warming script is, to put it mildly, full of crap. And I think of cities like Boston, which I grew up not too far from. There's a lot of waterfront property. Waterfront property. High value waterfront property.
Yeah.
The Cape, a lot of nice buildings out there, a lot of older buildings out there. I don't see really anybody running for the hills. I don't see anybody selling their homes. I don't see the homes being physically relocated or torn down. And people that are buying those homes
are buying them at a premium.
And the banks are willing to loan them the money.
Right.
If the banks were convinced, or any sort of investor were convinced that sea levels were going to rise and put those places underwater because 0.7 meters per, by the end of the century, or is that what they said, by the end of the century? 0.7 meters by the end of this per year by the end of the century, which is a long ways away.
Right.
But I just don't really. I feel like the banks and investors would be preemptively pulling out of that and being like, okay, well, let's build and invest over here where we're a little farther away from the potential. Because buildings need to last longer than 100 years. Really, honestly, if you're going to be, especially homes, I feel, and there's some buildings where I'm from that have been around since the late 1700s.
Even here in Alaska, is Portage Glacier melting so much that people can't, live in that valley, because there's down there where the wildlife conservatory is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like right there on the water. Are those banks being overflown, or do we drive down to that area and when the water secedes, it's just mud flats?
Yeah.
And if you go down to, downtown Anchorage, where there was this beachy area where you have that running trail along the water,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just like football fields and football fields of mud flats until you get to the water.
Right. Well, those mud flats are that's from the tide going in and out. We have one of the highest tides here. I think it's over 20 feet. But some of those trails, when the tide is up, you're not too far away from the water.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of waterfront property here too.
Right. But I mean, I bring that point up just to say that we have so much standing land ice here in Alaska.
We have an awful lot of standing ice here. But here's the other thing too, is from an evolutionary, and maybe not even evolutionary. This is debatable on another level, but the ice age,
right?
That's talked about. 1,000 years ago, maybe even longer, this whole place that we're even sitting in right now was covered in ice. And it's been receding, and I think that it was covered in ice based on the flood,
right?
Noah's Ark,
right?
It froze up because this was pretty bitterly cold. And has been basically receding ever since.
Yeah, I mean, Ice Age is mentioned in Job.
Mm-hmm. So it's been receding ever since, and it's only doing what it's been doing since that time.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that is, as it's receding, it's making more land mass available,
right,
for vegetation,
right,
and for humans to live on and other wildlife.
Yeah, and we're also discovering many new things as things continue to melt.
Right. Let's go back to.
So it's not all bad. I mean, if it's as dire as they're claiming it is, everybody here in, especially Anchorage, and the low-lying land locally here in Alaska, should be scared out of their minds because, my goodness, all the glaciers here locally that line this inlet, everyone should be panicking because those are all melting and we're all going to be underwater.
If the entire Greenland ice sheet melts, and I'm quoting here, sea levels would rise by 6 meters. Mm-hmm. I just don't see that occurring. First of all, because of weather, it does snow. There is a winter. It does replenish.
Right.
The sheets keep sliding down from further above, from the weather, from snowpack, from ice pack, from rain. And it keeps sliding down. It just repeats.
Right. It's all a process. All a process. I mean, Dan Pena, the $1 trillion man, has probably my favorite argument on the subject. Although I don't agree with all the reasoning that was given to him by a scientist. They're talking about how he tells a story about how him and his wife went to the Arctic to renew their vows at this fancy facility, and there were scientists there that were showing him and his wife these ice cores that they drilled from the ice, and they're like, oh, from looking at this point in the ice, in this period of time, the temperature here was colder than it was here, or the temperature here was warmer than it is here. And he said, but the scientists basically said, in the overall perspective of time, the difference in temperature was almost completely negligible. Mm-hmm. And he made the point that you were emphasizing earlier that, and he's an investor. Mm-hmm. He's a billionaire, land investor, business investor, and he says, the land investment opportunities in coastal lands are all but increasing, but these banks that are giving these loans for these properties, if they really believe global warming was happening, they wouldn't invest in those properties because they'd just be like throwing your money down a drain.
Right. It says here, coastal flooding by 2100. I don't believe that. That's pretty fast-paced, decay of ice and thawing. And for some, I've seen other articles that say, by 2050, and if you look at older, documents from, maybe the 90s or the 80s or something along those lines, it was coastal flooding by, the year 2030, 2040, somewhere around there. But, they just keep pushing the timeline back.
Yeah. Al Gore, the world's going to end in 2012.
Yep.
And now with, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, our good old googly-eyed AOC, is saying, the world's going to be over in 10 years. Or I think she might have said that 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. So now, according to AOC, we have like 6 years left.
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
Before we all die.
Yep. Banks are still loaning money for coastal properties.
Right.
I think we're okay, Cortez.
Yes.
Number 9, ocean acidification. Global temperature rise has not only affected the surface, but it is the main cause of ocean acidification. Our oceans absorb about 30% of carbon dioxide that is released into the Earth's atmosphere. As higher concentrations of carbon emissions are released thanks to human activities such as burning fossil fuels, they keep hammering that.
Yep.
As well as effects of global climate change, such as increased rates of wildfires, so do the amount of carbon dioxide that is absorbed back into the sea. The wildfires things is due to forestation or forest mismanagement.
Yeah.
Because they locked out certain parts, certain national forests, different areas that they couldn't log and then clean up and then replant because they've dried out. So you got all these forests that have grown up that can't be logged.
Yeah, they're tinderboxes.
You go through a drought for a couple of years. Now they're just, a tinderbox.
Yeah, definition of California.
So now, maybe the biggest cause of deforestation isn't human activity, it's wildfires because we mismanaged the forests.
That was the biggest argument, or one of the bigger arguments that was being made on the right side of the aisle in California, is that Newsom completely mishandled the forests there. Mm-hmm. They don't want to harm the environment. Well, they harm the environment by not managing it effectively. And even from a biblical standpoint, God gave us dominion over the earth, mm-hmm. over plants, over animals, and we are to care for it.
Right.
We are the caretaker.
100%. Yeah.
And so you're not being a good caretaker if you're enabling catastrophic things to occur.
Right. And you're only making it, uninhabitable, after the destruction of the forest goes through there, or, from the wildfires, different things like that.
Yeah, there's some cases where it helps and fertilizes, but...
there is. Yeah, you're right. But, I'm not a complete... I really don't know. I haven't studied much on the acidification of the oceans. I wouldn't even say that I'm on the fence about this. I think I'm a little, inclined to say that it's more bogus because it's kind of another catch-all.
Yeah,
to a degree.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, a lot of the stuff about the oceans, I wouldn't know how to comment on, other than, populations of fish by poaching or overfishing or things like that.
Yeah.
But that's about all I know for the oceans.
Quote, some scientists have estimated coral reefs are at risk of being completely wiped out by 2050. Higher acidity in the ocean would obstruct coral reef systems' ability to rebuild their exoskeletons and recover from these coral bleaching events.
So, I do have a question. Does this article look like it has any references?
No, I don't see any references up in here yet. I should scroll down to the bottom and see what we've got for
scroll down briefly because they just, every time that they say some scientists or these scientists or the science says, should be somewhere where they have a reference.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it should be right next to that sentence or the
right.
Yeah, exactly, right over.
Because that's what proper minimal collegiate level writing is supposed to be like. You're supposed to give references for all the quote unquote proof that you supply.
Yeah, I don't see any references down the bottom of this.
Yeah. So you can, at least from my perspective, as someone who's a critical thinker, if their proof is just trust me, or I heard these scientists say, and they give no data, and they provide nothing, then I would just, on the whole, not even look at this article. I would not even consider it because it's just all hearsay.
Moving on to number 10, agriculture. Studies have shown that the global food system is responsible for up to 1/3 of all human-caused greenhouse gas emissions, of which 30% comes from the livestock and fisheries. Crop production releases greenhouse gases such as nitrous oxide through the use of fertilizers. 60% of the world's agricultural area is dedicated to cattle ranching, although it only makes up to 24% of the global meat consumption. Agriculture not only covers a vast amount of land, but also consumes a vast amount of fresh water, another one of the biggest environmental problems on this list. While arable lands and grazing pastures cover 1/3 of the Earth's land surfaces, they consume 3/4 of the world's limited freshwater resources. Scientists and environmentalists have continuously warned that we need to rethink our current food system, switching to a more plant-based diet, which would dramatically reduce the carbon footprint of the environmental agricultural industries. I could pick that apart.
Yeah. They want you to eat. You will eat the bugs and you will like it.
Yeah. Pick that apart. So we're going to go. Let's just think about this for a second. We need to rethink our current food system, switching to a more plant-based diet. So that means an exponential amount of fields are required. Probably the same as, if not greater than, the amount of grazing land that they stated is currently in use.
Yeah, and
which I also think is bogus. 1/3 of Earth's land surfaces, while arable lands and grazing pastures cover 1/3 of Earth's surfaces.
Yeah, I don't believe that for a minute.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
That is 100% a lie. I'm willing to bet my next paycheck on it.
Yeah, I don't agree with that at all either. And it's just, this whole list is just, it's...
They consume 3/4 of the world's limited freshwater resources. Fresh water is replenished through rain and snowmelt and...
Yeah, or natural springs.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. That's just, to me, that just screams that they want less human beings.
Yeah, they're just trying
less
to
human beings, less agriculture for food.
Right, and the scary thing about that is someone who's a big supporter of this whole farmland idea, moving more towards fake meats, using plant-based meats.
Let me guess. The old Microsoft founder.
Yes, Bill Gates. And the scariest thing about that is Bill Gates is pretty sure he's the number one owner of vast farmland in the United States.
Vast quantities of farmland, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And he's been on a trail of just buying up all the available farmland in the United States.
Yeah. Number 11, food and water insecurity. Rising temperatures and unsustainable farming practices have resulted in the increasing threat of water and food insecurity and taking the mantle as one of the biggest environmental problems today. Unsustainable farming practices. What does that mean? What does that mean? That they wear out the land? Because I don't know. That's such a vague statement.
Yeah.
They don't really tell you what the farming practices are that are unsustainable. They don't tell you it at all.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't expect them to tell you anything.
Taking the mantle as one of the biggest environmental problems today. I thought they were all, the number one problem was burning fossil fuels.
No, see, but they tied it in because when you're farming, you're burning fossil fuels.
Yeah, maybe. Globally, more than 68 billion tons of topsoil is eroded every year at a rate of 100 times faster than it can naturally be replenished. I don't know if I believe that either.
No.
I don't know if I believe that either. Yeah, that one seems to be almost another catch-all to me too. All right, and since we're running low on time for this section, because I kind of went a little bit over, the last two are a little ridiculous. Number 12, fast fashion and textile waste.
Mm-hmm.
Seems a little broad to me.
Yep.
And number 13, overfishing. I think there's something to that, but I don't think it's contributing to, the climate change as a whole.
Yeah. Man, yeah, that list, we kind of beat a dead horse on that one.
We kind of did, and, I was just kind of going over, that was, from earth.org, and we just kind of picked it apart. They had some very few limited valid points, but most of it was
no references.
No references.
Just trust the science.
Yep.
Whoever the science is.
Yep. But I encourage the listeners to go to tacticalinvestor.com and look at the article on global warming is fake. Let's see if this is true, and just kind of read through that and see what you get out of it.
Yeah. Because they would have you believe that there's just a massive consensus among all scientists that global warming and climate change is the thing that will kill us as a species.
Well, they've been talking about it for years and years and years and years and years. I remember talking about it, when I was a kid, and they've just been drilling it. And I kind of had a different perspective on it because I had some conservative parents who were kind of cautioned me on that, and we talked about it, and we peeled those layers back. But I had some friends who I specifically remember when they were going through the classes in our local high school on environmentalism and how passionate they got about not hurting the trees and different things of that nature. And so now these poor kids, who were born in the 21st century, and are going through the education system now, I can only imagine what it is.
Yeah, it's gotten far worse.
So we beat that, as you said, beat that dead horse.
That horse is laying on the ground, tongue's hanging out, just beaten.
Yeah. What have you got for us today?
Well, two quick and brief things.
Sorry, I cut into your time. Sorry.
No, it's cool. I planned them to be really short and kind of brief. Lee Zeldin, he's currently running for governor in New York. And I don't know if you guys may remember this. He was previously attacked in public, in daylight, at a speech. A gentleman, from my understanding, tried to stab him.
With a screwdriver, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I heard screwdriver or some type of sharp-pointed tool. I think I heard someone say scissors once, but I don't know. Whatever it is, guy tried to stab him. And it seems ironic to me that violence is kind of following him. Because today there was some type of shooting outside his residence. And it says in the article that he was not, him and his family weren't targeted.
I don't know.
But the shooting took place nearby, and that there were two people that had been shot and were hiding near his home, and it scared his daughters, and they hid in the house and called 911. He's a candidate running for office against, I think it's Kathy Hochul in New York. It's just ironic. He's a Republican running against a Democrat in a mostly Democrat state.
It is interesting how they say that violence is not the answer from that side, but then all of a sudden they've been using violence for a long time. The riots,
They weren't violent. Fiery, but mostly peaceful.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot. Sorry.
The second one.
Those daggone spontaneous combustion fires that just magically appear. You know?
Spontaneous combustion. It's almost like it's like random adult death syndrome that came out after.
Oh yeah,
after
the vaccines.
The vaccines.
Yeah.
Random. Oh boy. Anyways.
Yeah, that's a medical term if I've heard any.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna give you 4 options, And I want, on the count of 3, I want you to tell which option you think you choose on who might have had a hand in the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipelines.
Okay.
First option, Putin. Second option, Ukraine, Zelensky, his folks. Third option, China. Fourth option, United States. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
United States. Isn't that sad?
Yeah.
And we could dissect this a little bit. I don't think Putin would sabotage himself, shoot himself in the foot. That's a cash cow for him.
Right. Well, I think it was one of the only things that gave him a stronghold over Europe.
Yeah, well, he had them by the neck.
Yeah.
By the back of the neck.
Yeah. Because he had already cut off fuel to, Germany and everyone already. But he still could have played with them.
Regardless, yeah.
It was something to hold over their head and say, hey, I still have control of this.
Yep.
The only reason I could think of him possibly nuking it on himself, not literally nuking it, but blowing it up on his own,
is to point the finger at somebody else.
Yeah.
Play the blame game.
Right. But then you're taking out the biggest thing that you have to control people.
It's also a huge risk. What if there were witnesses? What if a whistleblower comes forward? There's a multitude of different ways that could go wrong.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of dissenters of Russia and people who are trying to separate themselves from Russia, we recently had 2 folks show up here in Anchorage from Russia that came across the Bering Strait.
Really?
Yeah, they boated across and landed on one of the islands in Alaska seeking asylum because they don't want to go fight in Russia's, because there are 2 fighting age men that were going to be drafted into Russia's army to go and actively invade Ukraine.
They'll never be allowed back.
Oh, yeah.
Or they'll go to prison or maybe put to death.
Gulag.
Yep.
We have Gulag for you.
Number 2 for, what was it, China?
Yeah, China.
I don't think China would step on Russia's toes like that.
Yeah.
I don't think they have a reason to do that.
I don't think they have a reason to necessarily. The only reason I could think China may be affecting it. Oh, actually, I think 2 was Ukraine. But anyway, China. Only reason why I think they could do that would be to try to force a war between NATO allies and Russia.
That could be.
Because if both of them are saying, you did it, I didn't do it, and then Russia's going, hey, you did it, we didn't do it, then they fight each other, and then China can take over everything. That's the only logical reason I can maybe see them doing it. But at the same time, as annoyed as they might be on the weakness of Russia, I think they've realized that Russian military is kind of a paper tiger. Because they've been trying so hard to take over Ukraine.
Yeah, and that little army, that little nation has been putting up a fight.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the only reason why I think China could possibly have a hand in it. And
Yeah.
Ukraine,
They just don't have enough resources.
yeah. Unless they're completely and utterly paid for by NATO countries.
Right, and unless a NATO country or the United States helped them, in which case it would be us that did it.
Yeah. We gave quite a few billions of dollars
We did.
to Ukraine. So,
We did. But who knows where that money actually ended up?
Yeah.
Honestly,
Yeah. Oh,
did
yeah.
we give them $54 billion in cash? And if so, where did it go? How are they just disseminating that? Is that going to right back to the United States to the Raytheon Corporation for weapons? Is it going to different corporations that build war machines, weapons?
Yeah, from what I've heard.
Going to pay soldiers? What is it? Where's it going?
Yeah, from what I heard, it was supposed to go towards weapons and arming them. But from what I've heard from people who've gathered intel from inside, is that they don't know where it's gone. There's no paper trail. It got
perfect.
to Ukraine, and then nothing else after.
So there
that.
was no stipulations on the money. Like, okay, we need receipts. We need this. We need this. We need this.
Yeah.
We need to track this by from point A to point B to point C.
Yeah.
It seems like it's irresponsible. It doesn't seem that way. It is. It's
Yeah.
100% irresponsible because they just gave away $54 billion of American taxpayer money, and it's gone.
Yeah. Forget forget us drowning in debt and
Drowning in the literal sea, apparently.
and gas and literal sea in Florida with all the hurricane and all that mess. Forget helping the American people. Anyway, and then America.
Yeah. And what did Joe Biden say?
Well, Joe Biden said this. Let me share it with you.
Tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again, then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly? Since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will. I promise you, we'll be able to do it. If Russia invades,
But how will you do that? The project is controlled by Germany. How? I promise you we'll do it. Like what?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as we learned recently, we don't mess with a Biden. That was one of the most recent things he told somebody. You don't F with a Biden, is what he said to somebody on a hot mic recently.
Oh.
And so, I mean, maybe he's not lying. Maybe you don't mess with a Biden. Oh, man. If this house plant gets us into World War III, I'm not going to be very happy.
I'm not happy now.
Oh, yeah. And there's just so much talk of so much stuff going on for World War III, you know?
We shall see.
Yeah.
Only time will tell.
And, hey, what's that sound?
I don't know. It sounds
Kind of like
nuclear winter?
Yes, nuclear winter. I mean, Biden has said that, it's not a joke. I'm not kidding. Well, Russia's not kidding, he said. He says Putin is pushing towards nuclear war and that we shouldn't take it lightly. And it doesn't seem like the U.S. government is taking it lightly either, because there has been a recent purchase that the U.S. government has made concerning some medicine to help mitigate radiation sickness or acute radiation sickness.
Really?
Yes. There's been multiple different articles on it. I'm currently reading from the Epic Times, but it says the U.S. Health and Human Services is buying $290 million worth of drugs. The particular drug is called Nplate from Amgen USA, and it's to help with acute radiation syndrome. And, of course, the HHS was sure to let us know that this has nothing to do with what's going on in Russia. But it looks like they're just trying to, we're going to keep our long-standing, ongoing efforts to be better prepared for radiological and nuclear emergencies. But again, don't think about Russia. We're not talking about Russia.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
I don't know. So does the U.S. government buy medication to combat acute radiation sickness during, like, this particular phase of the moon that we're in? Like,
No.
Is that how that works?
Maybe. Who knows?
Or is it because they're prepping for something?
I think they're prepping for something. I think that they think that Putin is just crazy enough, even if he did blow up his own Nord Stream pipeline, he's just crazy enough to actually pull the trigger on some type of nuclear weapon, whether it be big boom nuclear weapon like we saw at the end of World War II with us, or tactical nukes, which are more modern versions that may have less of a radiation yield sometimes. They have more radiation yield sometimes. Nukes come in all kind of sizes. It's not little boy and
Fat Man
anymore.
Those were small by today's standards anyway.
Right. And if you've been in on any social media, and first of all, we don't know how much we can trust this kind of media coming from citizens in other countries, but there's been plenty of videos from Russian citizens showing transport of many type of nuclear weapons across all of Russia. And there was also a submarine that was being armed with nuclear weapons that they're saying holds a payload of a particular nuclear weapon from Russia that would be absolutely world devastating.
Well, the Russians, the Soviets rather, did create the world's largest nuclear bomb.
The Tsar bomb.
The Tsar bomb, yep.
Yeah.
Which was, let's see, I'm trying to find an actual size comparison here. The Tsar bomb also represented 25% of the estimated yield of the Krakatoa volcanic eruption in 1883.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just something to keep your eye on. I know we're all tired of hearing about Ukraine. We're all tired of seeing what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. But it's still really important to still pay attention, keep your head on a swivel, keep up to date with everything, obviously, and hope that everything kind of chills out.
Maybe cooler minds will prevail in the Soviets. Here we go again. The Russian government, maybe.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of people in Russia don't want this fight to continue. I think they are looking for some kind of leadership to replace Putin, because I think there's some talk on the inside that he's kind of lost it, and there's rumors that he's dying, that he's sick, he's got some kind of cancer, and he's desperate for the attention of the country. He's desperate for the support of the country, and so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah,
but
I don't know why you wouldn't want, as a leader of a country, why you would not want to pass away if you knew your time was coming. And this is, we're just speculating on his actual health conditions. But if I was a leader of a country and I was ill, knowing death was approaching, or just, old age, death is approaching, I would want to pass away during a time of prosperity and peace.
Right.
I think you get remembered better that way.
Right.
Or as the victor from an invasion, successfully defending your homeland from an invasion.
Yeah, and that's why, even though he's one of the worst presidents ever in the USA, that's why FDR is basically canonized as a saint.
Yeah.
Is because he won the World War, and he's an absolute horrible president. Absolutely horrible.
Yeah, and I've realized that over the last, probably several years, that FDR was not a good president at all.
Yeah.
Really some bad programs that came out initialized by him.
I would vastly argue that Herbert Hoover was way better than FDR. The worst is probably Woodrow Wilson, but
he got us into the League of Nations, or started the League of Nations, and that was the eventuality of that became the UN.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've had some pretty bad presidents. I mean, Joe's working his way up, or I should say down. But so that's that. And I have one last topic for today, and I've been saving it all up for you, Pennsylvania, my home state, where I was born and raised.
Here we go.
Warming up the hands. What is going on in Pennsylvania? I think, do we forget how nice it is to have freedom in Pennsylvania? To have rights, to be able to bear arms, the meaning of life. Because the Pennsylvania that I grew up in, that was most central to what was common when I was younger, was a Pennsylvania that believed in the Constitution. It was a very pro-America Pennsylvania, because it was right on the heels, and when Pennsylvania was really, really pro-America, it was right on the heels of 9/11. Because we as Pennsylvanians were completely affected by 9/11. And I mean, Flight 93 crashed in Pennsylvania, not far from where I grew up. I think it was about a 30 minute drive from my house to where Flight 93 crashed in Shanksville. So it's just incredible how we've completely forgotten what it means to be an American. It seems, from my view of Pennsylvania, because we're ready to hand this whole thing over to John Fetterman. And I don't know why you would even consider that route.
Well, we obviously considered as a whole, as a nation, we could debate this. I mean, we don't even have to debate, to me. But the whole nation apparently chose Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. I think the election was stolen.
Yeah, me too. But, Pennsylvanians are sleeping, and they need to wake up. And I know a lot of good, God-loving, God-fearing Christian folks in Pennsylvania that need to get a lot louder, especially in the Johnstown, Richland, Windber area. They need to get a lot louder and need to get out there. Hey, you can create a podcast like me. You can go knocking on doors. You can go passing out flyers, but you need to get a lot louder and a lot prouder as Americans, as patriots, to get out there and do your best to try to kick the can of this John Fetterman guy, who's just a nightmare of an issue for the state of Pennsylvania. And I mean, he's right up there with some of the kooks that we had in San Diego, Southern California, and California in general. He's right up there with those guys. And I can't stand how the left is fighting for this guy. He's just, I mean, people always think that conservatives are always digging on how the guy dresses. He wears hoodies and shorts and stuff. He doesn't dress very professionally, which...
That's the least of his problems.
Right, yeah. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It does. Because if you...
Well, yeah, I can see that, but I mean, in the scope of everything, that's the least of his problems. But yes, if you're running for that type of office, at least dress respectfully.
Right. Yeah, you serve the people. It's not your job to be buddy-buddy with the people. It's like when you work a job. If I had someone working for me in an office space, I would expect them to dress professionally.
Right.
Maybe not even Sunday's best, but nice pair of pants and a button-up. Maybe he dresses the way he does because...
Sticking it to the man.
Well, yeah. I think that's what they would say. But also, I think maybe it could be a medical issue. He does have quite a growth on his neck, and maybe that wouldn't work with a collar on a button-up shirt. Perhaps that's why he wears hoodies. But anyway, like we were saying, that's not the important thing. And I don't see why folks on the left are willing to vote for this guy. There are so many things that are problematic about him for left and right. These are my reasons why I don't think John Fetterman is a worthwhile candidate for the Senate. Now, I will say, before I dig into this a little more, I don't like Oz either. Pennsylvania, you need to start digging up better candidates, or maybe some normal people need to start raising funds and running on their own. But both these guys are very distasteful for me, but at least Oz, from what he's saying, is supporting a platform that most aligns with American values, constitutional values, things like that. But John Fetterman, he is a Harvard-educated son of parents that he lived with until he was nearly 50. So
neat. That
just screams success to me. I decided that I was leaving home at the age of 17 to sort out my own adventure.
Yeah, I left home after I graduated high school, and I was 18 years old.
Yeah. I left. I decided that I was leaving when I was 17. I didn't officially leave until after I had turned 18. Mm-hmm. But yeah, after the Marine Corps finally said, "All right, you're up."
Yep.
So that's one thing. I mean, I'm glad you still had mommy and daddy with you there for a while, but hey, it is what it is. One of the big issues is that he's a big friend of cop killers and criminals. I mean, not too surprising himself being a criminal. He's big on supporting pardons for people who have been charged and convicted with murder.
Now, you said he was a criminal. Can you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So there was an instance where he was caught on camera vandalizing a business, from what I understand. And when he was asked about it, because this happened in Braddock, which is the town that he was the mayor of. And this happened while he was mayor. And he vandalized the place on the outside.
He seems to me just to be a power-hungry individual.
Yeah, a power-hungry individual.
But I'm sorry, just continue, yeah. Because I was just saying, you start out as mayor, or maybe did he start somewhere else further or earlier than that?
Not that I could track.
Okay. But anyway, it just seems like he's on that. I mean, you start out as a mayor, jumping up to a senator is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, well, so
But
right
anyway,
now...
Yeah.
Right now, currently, he's the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I was just saying he's worked his way up. But it just seems like he's a power-hungry individual. But anyway, what was he caught doing?
So yeah, he got caught vandalizing, and so that's just one issue. It kind of ties him into that thing. And when he was asked about it, he expressed that he knew he was on camera, and I don't know why. And I say criminal lightly because it doesn't seem like there was any repercussions for what he did. Nothing was brought against him, from what I understand. But as far as I'm concerned, just because you don't get charged with a criminal act, especially one that's caught on tape, doesn't mean you're not a criminal in my book. Like if you shoot somebody on film and you get away with it, you still shot that person. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's an extreme example, of course, but so he's not afraid of doing any type of criminal action of his own accord.
And the incident with the jogger?
Oh, yes, we'll get there. Yeah, his board of pardons recommended the commutation of 46 sentences, including 13 sentences that were for convicted murderers. So trying to get them out of jail. So 13 convicted murderers trying to get them out of jail. He appointed Celeste Trusty, who is a friend of a famous cop killer, Mamaya Abdul Jamal. Sorry, I probably butchered that name. So he's buddy with folks that are deep in the prison system. And he also endorsed Larry Krasner. Since then, under his watch, murder shot up 40%. So sounds like a really great DA there. He's probably one of those possibly George Soros funded DAs that is happy to let people out of prison.
Or just not bring charges against them.
Or just not charge anyone. So if you want a safe, law-abiding Pennsylvania, please do not vote for Fetterman. Again, don't like Oz, but he's better than Fetterman. Also, I don't know how many of you people there in Pennsylvania are parents. He also very heavily supported COVID lockdowns and school closures. He's called school closures for COVID an absolute necessity, which, if you guys know anything about kids and the way they have been affected by COVID, it's been an absolute nightmare for kids because they weren't as prone to getting sick by COVID than adults were. They were the least affected group, but they were most affected action-wise. Kids were forced to wear a mask. Kids were forced to be separated from each other. They were forced to not be in school, away from their friends. I mean, teen suicide and child suicide nearly doubled over the course of this. And kids are still reaping the decisions that adults made on their behalf. And it's affected them greatly. There's been such a drop in grades, education level. There's so many kids that don't know how to do math, don't know how to read, even more so than they did before this whole lockdown thing happened. So it's just been an absolute disaster. Also, Fetterman also does not support school vouchers or the type of school choice program that Trump was trying to give to people to allow people that live in low-performing school districts a chance to go to a better school. But of course, like most politicians, John Fetterman's kids can go to an awesome school. They can go to a nice private school called Winchester Thurston School. It's a private school that charges nearly $35,000 a year for your student to attend there. But guess where his kids don't go to school?
The district that he's in, which is probably a low-performing district.
Correct. Yes. They do not attend the Braddock School District because it's considered sub-average, and he still lives there. They still live there, and he does not send his kids there. They go to a nice private school, which is really funny because there's just so much money coming in. I mean, I imagine a salary of a lieutenant governor, still not a whole lot.
Well, how many kids does he have?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, okay, so at least one, let's just say at least one, $35,000 a year, which is more than probably the average mean income of the average Pennsylvania citizen.
Yeah, especially in the poorer areas, which there are a lot of in Pennsylvania, because steel and coal is gone.
Yep.
So,
or they just completely ravaged that industry.
Yeah. If he says that he's going to bring that back, also don't believe that.
Yeah.
Because he very much does not support that. And then lastly, and this is the kind of kick in the pants kind of thing, lefties, listen to this one. In 2013, John Fetterman, your golden boy, attacked a man who was jogging. And not just any man, you might say, but it was a black man who was jogging in Braddock, in the town that he was the mayor of. And without evidence, Fetterman went after the man like he was a criminal and held a shotgun on the guy until the police came to take over the instance, take over the scene. But it's okay, he's a Democrat. Well, why don't we pay attention to that? I'll just throw that out the window.
I just find it ironic that he wants to, go after that guy, lock him up, accuse him of criminal behavior with no proof, and yet he wants to commute sentences of convicted felons.
Right.
I find that very ironic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how can you commute sentences of violent felons if there aren't any violent felons in prison? He's just job security.
Right.
Job security.
Right.
It's just like Kamala. Job security. I gotta. How do I fight to get folks out of prison? Well, I gotta put them in prison first.
Right.
And then I gotta use them as cheap slave labor in California first, and then I'll think about letting them out. I just have to use them as a platform.
Right.
That's why we need to get rid of John Fetterman. He cannot be trusted. He is extremely problematic. And guess what? I didn't even talk about his medical issues. Well, except for the giant tumor-like thing on the back of his neck. But we all know he had a stroke. Some say it might have been caused by the COVID jab. Don't know. There's no proof for or against that from what I can find that's legitimate. But yeah, I mean, the guy's still learning how to talk.
Yeah, from a health perspective, I mean, even if it was the best candidate, and had all the right, qualities and principles about them, if you had a stroke or some kind of medical episode that left you disabled permanently or
even temporarily, briefly,
I think you should probably drop out because the stress of that job could probably make it worse.
Yeah.
But also, let's say you get into the Senate, and then you pass away, your seat is now open and a new representative has to be voted on. In the meantime, important issues are not being dealt with.
I have not seen a president go into office or a governor go into office or a senator go into office and come out looking younger.
No.
They all go in and come out with gray hair. And if you're going in with a history of strokes, that's not something that just magically disappears.
Nope.
And you get better from. Typically after a stroke, especially a major stroke where your ability to speak or your ability to walk or your ability to see or something like that is affected,
you're at greater risk.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, you're at greater risk. And, the more you usually, now I know where I was going. And after that, you usually have to change your lifestyle. You have to think about eating healthier. You have to avoid stressful situations. you have to take care of yourself in a more detailed way.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't be focused the way you need to be focused as a governor.
Right. And now, too, let's say you need some sort of disability stuff, a different type of vehicle, a different type of assistance in living, and he gets the senator seat, then the taxpayer has to foot the bill for all that.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying, I'm not going against people that are disabled being able to work. That's not what we're saying here at all, by any means, but it just seems like that type of job with that. I mean, as a U.S. soldier, if you were, and you a Marine, if your body was compromised, if you had a stroke in the Marines or in the Army, you're done.
Yeah, medical separation.
You're getting medically discharged.
Yeah.
So, because you can't do the job.
Yeah, and they can't.
And it doesn't matter if you're a clerk in the warehouse or you're an actual combat soldier. Every Marine is expected to be able to hold the rifle and fight if need be.
Yeah.
So,
or at least do your job.
At least do your job. But,
and
but if they need to call on you to uphold your combat duty, then you can't.
Yeah, and you could be a fire hot Marine, like best scores on everything, best scores PFT. You could be black belt, but the minute you have something like that happen, you could be like McMat black belt. You could be on an Excel track to pick up corporal, or you're 3 years in and you're picking up sergeant. Like, you could be a fire Marine. But if you have an instance like that, they can't take a risk on you, and you most likely will get medically separated, because if they can't trust you to fulfill a duty spot, or fulfilling that duty spot puts you in danger of your health or your life, they're
and they're not only doing it for them, getting rid of the risk per se, but they're also doing it for you.
Yeah.
Because you need to be able to, get into a job that's going to be able to, you're going to be able to recover, and it's going to be able to adapt, to you and your needs. Whereas the Marines in the Army and the other military organizations are not expected to conform to your needs. You need to conform to theirs.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And that, there were plenty of instances where I was injured. Mm-hmm. And
Same.
I mean, goodness, I almost got medically separated right off the bat in boot camp, because they saw something with, my face and my eyelids and my eyes. I was more prone to getting like pink eye and things like that. And their reasoning was basically, if we send you to the sandbox, because my eyes don't close all the way at the time. And they said, if you go out into the front lines, into this with this issue into the desert, even though we give you goggles with your gear, those ESS goggles, it would still be problematic for you, because you're not going to wear those to sleep. And if there's all this fine sand and dust everywhere, you would be dealing with eye infection after eye infection. You wouldn't be effective in your role. So we can't see you staying in. And so they were going to separate me medically. But somehow, magically, something got flipped around. Someone said something, someone did something, but I was able to stay in. And I eventually, later on in my service, had surgery to fix the issue. But I mean, a stroke is something you can't fix like that.
Yeah.
It's not fixable by plastic surgery. It's something that doesn't really go away. It's something that kind of sticks in the back of your mind, and that you have to be aware of constantly. Like I said, I wouldn't trust him in office, not only for the medical issues, but just his past actions and his past political actions in his role as a leader. He's just not he's not a good guy.
Yeah, I just see him as too power hungry.
Yeah, and also, I mentioned the medical stuff because obviously I want him to get better. Like, I want him to be healthy. I don't wish for him to have more strokes and die or something like that. That's not cool to wish on anybody, having been personally affected by strokes and things like that in my own life. But I want him to get better. I want him to be healthy. I hope he does figure out the whole talking thing again.
From what I've heard, it seems like he has been doing pretty well recovering his speech.
Yeah. I don't think he's in a spot where he can faithfully and diligently fulfill the duties of the office. It's as simple as that. And that's something it seems like Oz can do. He's healthy, standing tall, no strokes, no underlying medical issues that are noticeable. He is kind of fishy because he was a Democrat for a long time, kind of back and forth. So I don't trust him either, but at least he can be trusted to fulfill the duties of the office. How good he does, I don't know. It seems like it's possible. I just don't want to see a repetition of Joe in the governorship of Pennsylvania. But that's it.
Yeah, it's been a long show today.
Yes. I'll have a lot of editing to do.
That's all right.
I enjoy it.
Good. Yeah, because I'd be a little lost. I'm sure I could figure it out, but yeah, if you like doing that, it's good. But we appreciate you listening. We have all of our social media stuff that you can definitely look into and send us messages and questions and things of that nature. And
Yep, Truth Social, Instagram, Getter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're all over the place. We're also available at our email at patriotpravda1776@gmail.com. If you have any questions, you could reach out to us there. You can find us on any kind of podcasting platform. We're on pretty much all of them. Amazon, Google, Castbox, Spotify, Apple. We're everywhere.
Double Pod.
Yep.
Some of those oddball apps you
Yeah.
can find for podcasts.
Yeah, Podchaser, a couple other ones. But it's the easiest thing to do to find us is just go to Google and Google Patriot Pravda. It'll bring you right to us, right to our Spreaker page. And also just a quick thanks to Spreaker as well. It's been a great platform to work through and start to get our podcast out there. It's been super easy. They've been super helpful as well.
Pretty seamless. I mean, not pretty seamless. It is seamless.
Yeah. I have no complaints, and I'm just thankful for it because it's a good place to get our thoughts down in audio form.
And we're thankful to you, the listeners, and we're also thankful to our Heavenly Father, God, for giving us the freedoms that we do have, and especially the freedom that comes with accepting Christ as your Savior.
Yeah.
And we just pray that God continues to bless y'all, and God bless
America.
Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Go and tell that long-tongued liar. Go and tell that midnight rider. Tell the rambler, the gambler, the backbiter. Tell him that God's gonna cut him down.